Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, February 21st, 2025. Time for yet another show. We're going to close out the week and enter the busy period in the Trump era, the weekend, where the chaos happens, where Trump wanders around and gaggles of reporters follow him, and he says stuff like, I'm gonna kill everybody, or let's shoot all of Arizona, or something like that. And then we all react to it. And then someone tells us it's a distraction. Don't pay attention to the fact that he's promised to execute every living citizen of Arizona. He's really, I don't know what, looking to kill every living citizen of Michigan instead. And how dare you be distracted, or whatever it may be. And then we fight amongst ourselves for a little while. So that's how my weekend, that's my plan for the weekend. I have some other things planned, including ignoring some of that, but not because it's a distraction, just because I only have so much capacity for these things. And of course, pocket filled to capacity with things that I wanted to bring you, some of which got tucked away based on the strength of headlines and authorship, but then on further review, I'm not certain that I learned anything when I skimmed it. I don't mean to call anybody out or anything, and I have still the greatest respect for, great writer Zeynep Tufekci, who has been right about so many things early on and was, pretty much dead on during the first Trump administration, and about so many things that you didn't necessarily think fell within her issue expertise. And I don't know, this may just be a case of an ambitious headline being slapped on something by somebody else. It's not a bad article, and it's not incorrect or anything like that. It just doesn't deliver on the promise of the headline of, here are the digital clues to what Musk is really up to. And given that it was written by Zeynep, I thought I was going to get an article that says, okay, here's what I think Elon Musk is actually going to do with all of the data he's stealing from the various federal agencies. And I mean, if the answer was going to be he's going to close those federal agencies or cut jobs in those federal agencies, that wouldn't be news. Even if it was, well, he's going to create some sort of master algorithm that he can use to target people for political messaging. That would be news in terms of getting reported. It would corroborate things that we've speculated on also, which would also make it interesting, but it's not here. And what it basically is, this article should have been titled, "Here are the various agencies that Musk and his weirdos have kicked their way into, and the nature of the data that they've stolen." And she does a great job in cataloging the fact that they first kicked their way into let's see, how does she put it? First, kicking their way into OPM, and that gave them all sorts of data about government employees. And then they kicked their way into, what else? What came next? Let's see how she puts it. Treasury Department, and that gave them access to where all the money was going, including all government payments, not only to individuals and corporations, but more specifically, it would include payments and financial arrangements and financial information about companies that are competitors to Musk's companies. And that's true too. And then they kicked their way into the Social Security Administration and the IRS and got information on everybody else. So this sort of, there was an escalating move from give me all the information about people who work for the government, to give me all the information about where the government spends its money, to give me all the information that the government has on every citizen. And then I guess that's kind of it in terms of how much information or the universe of people about whom they could seize information. But then it doesn't go anywhere from that. It just says, well, if you have that information, you have the ability to do lots of things. I thought, given the headline, what Musk is really up to, we were going to find out, okay, what does he do with all the information? The answer is there's any number of things he could do, but there's not even a list of what they are. So I'm going to save you a click or two, but it's always a pleasure reading what she has to say. So if you need a good backgrounder or reminder of the various agencies into which he has broken, it's not a comprehensive list, but it hits the highlights, I guess. I don't know. I had big plans for this being a larger part of the beginning of the show. Excited to see Zeynep chiming in on this, and I still am. But yeah, I don't know if it moves the ball any further than we've taken it here. It doesn't mean she's done a bad job. Maybe it just means we've done a good job catching up with it from everybody else. But if you want a list of something, and why wouldn't you? Here is something from Politico Europe, which, again, I try not to recommend that you spend any time over at Politico, but sometimes, like with the New York Times, they do a good job on something. And here is, I thought, an important list from Tim Ross, who writes 29 times that Donald Trump did what Putin wanted. And I don't know if they're all 29 from this past month, but I think that's the implication. But just as a good backgrounder for those of you who keep hearing me say semi-tongue-in-cheek, but less so these days, political union with Russia to own the globalists. By the way, I guess I should say that was always part of the joke. I don't know that it has anything to do with owning globalists. I don't know if they want to make... That's been the rhetoric and the Steve Bannon line for selling what they're doing. Well, you hate globalists, don't you? Let's own the globalists. Now, it doesn't make any particular sense to say, well, political union with another giant world power to almost fully dominate the entirety of the Northern Hemisphere is, bit of a globalist view, I guess. But yeah, to the extent that they were serious about owning the globalists, I don't know whether you can really, I don't know if you can really count on them to deliver. I don't know if globalists bother them or they were just a route to unify people behind, beating up on somebody in particular. But I don't know whether they really need to own the globalists. They just want to do the political union with Russia, even if they don't own anybody with it. Anyway, 29 times Donald Trump did what Putin wanted, and you'll see kind of cataloged here how much coddling of Putin and how much laying down for Putin is really going on here. The subheader actually reads, whose side is he on? Now, this is the president of the United States that you're just boldly asking that question of, believe it or not, Politico Europe, but still Politico, to just say that outright in the subheader. Whose side is the president of the United States on? It's hard to keep up, so here's a handy guide to America's new policy of close alignment with the Kremlin, political union. Again, Tim Ross writing it out here. Donald Trump says Vladimir Zelensky is a, quote, dictator, even though he won a fair election in 2019. But the United States president doesn't say the same about Vladimir Putin, right? Do not congratulate, but he did do that. Even though the main opponent, or rather Putin's main opponent, died in jail a few weeks before Putin won a rigged election last year. Don't forget that. In the past few weeks, Trump and his team have also undermined NATO, backed far-right politicians in Europe, and vowed to hit the European Union with a trade war for its, quote, very unfair treatment of the U.S. No wonder a growing number of European officials and diplomats think the American president is really on Russia's side, and they might have wanted to consult with some American senators, particularly Democratic senators, about that at the Munich conference, and it was particularly important to them that they show up and speak to them in private, in person, rather than hang around for a losing vote on some nominations that would take place a couple hours later. I think that might have been part of their calculation. It could absolutely be laziness and an unwillingness to stand up and fight. There's plenty of evidence of that too. A competing theory, we'll call it. But Trump's world moves fast, and it's hard to remember everything, so that's a good point. Flooding the zone, that's the point of it. So here's a recap of 29 times. I assume they were searching around desperately for a 30th, just to round out the number, but didn't find it, which I guess is good news. Maybe you can think of one along the way. Recap of 29 times that Trump has sided with Putin in his first month back in power? There's the answer to the scope. They could probably get to 100 if they went back to last time. 1, picking up the phone, which he loves to do. How do they mean? Almost 3 years after Russia's unprovoked full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Trump decided it was time to reestablish direct contact between the president of the United States and Putin, a leader facing U.S. and EU sanctions, as well as an international criminal court arrest warrant, for crimes against humanity and genocide. I don't know if any of those matter to people, but there they are. So he picked up the phone on February 12th for a 90-minute chat with, a war criminal. Number 2, praising Putin like he deserves total respect. And a quote here, "I want to thank President Putin for his time and effort with respect to this call." Trump said afterwards, "We both reflected on the great history of our nations," and he's capitalizing that, of course, "and the fact that we fought so successfully together in World War II. He said, "We agreed to work together very closely, including visiting each other's nations." That's close work. I'll play golf in your nation. You watch me play golf in my nation. And that's how something will happen. And I realize, I guess this is like splitting hairs a little bit. He picked up the phone. That was one time he did something that Putin wanted. And then he said nice things to him after he hung up the phone. That's apparently a separate entry. Yeah, so they may be stretching a little bit, but these are things. 3, saying he'd, quote, love to see Russia back in the G7, which they add parenthetically would make it the G8, but who's counting? "I'd love to have them back. I think it was a mistake to throw them out," he told reporters in the Oval Office the day after the Putin call. He said the same in his first term, but that was before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Number 4, letting Putin keep loads of Ukrainian territory. Trump's defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, rejected Ukraine's goal of reclaiming all the land Russia had taken since 2014 as unrealistic. That whipped the rug out from underneath Ukraine in any future negotiation. Whipped, okay. Hegseth also gave Putin exactly what he wanted by saying Kyiv wouldn't be joining NATO either. And then number 5, not only letting Putin keep all that Ukrainian territory, but number 5, then warning Russia has loads of Ukrainian territory. Trump himself then noted that Russia now holds the cards in peace talks because they've taken a lot of territory. Interesting. So he cedes it to them. Number 6, conceding Putin's wish for no NATO mission in Ukraine. Sort of covered in number 3 there, but more from Hegseth, who said any troops from NATO countries who serve in Ukraine won't be covered by the alliance's Article 5, which states that an attack on one member is an attack on all. So if they station themselves either actively fighting in Ukraine's defense or as neutral observers or peacekeepers of some kind, and they're, killed as part of a collateral damage in an attack, the U.S. says, meh, your own fault on that one. So it's up to you. Number 7, ruling out sending U.S. troops to Ukraine. Another Putin pleaser from Hegseth. Number 8. I like that. I'm going to add that to the repertoire. Number 8 is telling Europe, which has relied on American protection since 1945. Remember when we successfully fought World War II together? By the way, we had to remain behind to protect Europe from the people we successfully fought World War II with. But, okay. Now telling Europe to take care of itself. Russia worries about American troops fighting a war to stop them from reclaiming their old empire. War with the Europeans? Not so much. Number 9, holding unconditional talks with Russia in Saudi Arabia. Trump gave Putin generous concessions on NATO and Ukrainian territory to Russia before the talks even started. He could have demanded a Russian ceasefire, for instance, as a precondition for the first talks between the two sides' top diplomats, but for some reason he didn't. In fact, there were apparently no preconditions at all. Well, maybe there was one. Number 10 begins. Zelensky's team wasn't allowed in the room. Kyiv and its allies say there must be no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine. Well, whatever. Number 11, refusing to let Europe in either. Brussels, the Sprouts people, kept complaining that Europe is being cut out of the peace process. America doesn't care, and Putin is fine with that. Number 12, saying Zelensky, quote, started the war. Well, he didn't. Russia started the war, but has been trying to blame Zelensky for it ever since. Now it has the White House claiming the same. Oh, by the way, somewhere, I don't know whether I put it away. I should make note to self. Again, collecting notes about things I want to tell you about later. And let's see. I got another article that the mention of Saudi Arabia reminds me I would like to read. But this one here, where were we? Oh, right. Saying Zelensky started the war. There was something I saw, and I think I probably reposted it on Blue Sky. I might be able to locate it there. But interesting replay of part of Putin's playbook on Ukraine. As you know, Putin has been claiming all along, the basis, the germ of the claim for Ukraine started the war is, oh, well, Russia has invaded to denazify Ukraine. You see, Zelensky has let a cadre of neo-Nazis come into power, is their Russian claim, in Ukraine. And we're trying to stamp that out because of how anti-Nazi we are here in increasingly Nazi dictatorship Russia. Sure. Well, anyway, it didn't go over all that well in the West, but there's still a pretty good portion of the West that kind of bought into it. And there's certainly evidence. I mean, Ukrainian history is not spotless when it comes to Nazism. That's clearly the case. But, it's a difficult sell with Zelensky, who is half Jewish, for instance. Anyway, they launched a similar play, and I guess they were just sort of testing the waters. They must be. But I don't think it goes over. It doesn't hit quite the same. We don't know what the hell's going on in Ukraine. And Ukraine had a history with Nazi collaboration when they were occupied by Nazis during World War II. That's true. But say, for instance, what's happening now, for Russia to try to sell in the West that they are increasingly concerned with the Nazification of Canada seems a stretch. But it's like the same play, and as people were pointing out, Trump's interest in and casual reference of annexing Canada as a 51st state is a little bit like Putin's insistence that he can just annex Ukrainian territory, that it's just a thing that you can do and everybody should get out of the way for it. Well, another new parallel there is to say, not that they think Justin Trudeau is an outright Nazi or anything like that, although I guess that's the next step in their accusations. They might as well accuse him of that while they're at it. But they were expressing concern with rising neo-Nazi sentiment in Canada. And I suppose, Canada's got enough people that somewhere they've got neo-Nazis. It's a little difficult to integrate the swastika into the maple leaf thing. It doesn't, lend itself shape-wise, but it can be done. I'm sure, like in most of the United States, or at least until recently, it was such a insane, and for a number of reasons. They were insane personally, but the size was insanely small of the group that you couldn't even really call it a movement, but it's a good excuse in the Russian view. Selling Americans on having the world's most polite Nazis to our north will be a little different. But there are people who will repeat anything. Maybe Matt Taibbi or whatever his name is will write on it next. The Twitter files will reveal that the maple syrup industry is rife with Nazism. All right, number 13 here. We still got a ways to go. Saying Zelensky is incompetent. Everyone is entitled to a view. It just happens that this one serves Russia's purpose of undermining Zelensky's legitimacy at home. Number 14, saying that he's incompetent while not really criticizing Putin much at all. It's a stretch to turn some of these things into separate listings. But number 15, saying Putin can be trusted and wants peace. Don't worry, Putin is solid on Ukraine, Trump told the BBC. Maybe he forgot all the times Russia said it wasn't going to invade. And, of course, all the times that Trump said that that was the case. Oh, they won't invade. They had already invaded Crimea, of course. But they won't invade the other part, and they had already done that too. But, with mercenary troops or foreign active troops in the Donetsk region, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Number 16, calling for elections in Ukraine. Russia likes elections in nearby countries because it can meddle with the process. It can meddle in our process, so it can meddle in theirs too. And it has been hoping to get the chance to install a new government in Kyiv since before the start of the war. Trump says Zelensky should call a vote ASAP. The problem is there's a war on, And by the way, once again, the idea of manipulating their elections, we've known about that for some time in Ukraine specifically. And in particular, I mentioned the taped conversation revealed to all of us by the Washington Post when they used to reveal such things of the then Republican leadership in the House in June 2016, before Trump had actually secured the Republican nomination, but recounting to one another among the Republican leadership their visit with the then Ukrainian prime minister, who had come all the way to Washington, D.C. to personally warn them of the fact that Russia was in fact meddling in their elections and meddling in their affairs and was prepared for a wider scale invasion, having already made short work of Crimea by that point, and that they were going to be, attempting to manipulate the elections to elect a pro-Russian government there and, in fact, throughout the West. Paul Ryan himself recognizing it as a diabolical plot, using the word diabolical, and but everyone then attempting to agree that, the only one who's standing up to this, is, of course, is us. And then we're reminded by Kathy McMorris, McRogers, McBean that we're not actually standing up to it. And then they all say, all right, well, we're not standing up to it, but let's all agree to keep it a secret because we think that they're paying Trump. And if that's the case and he locks up the nomination, we stand to win. They'll fix the election in favor of Republicans. Let's not tell anybody because then we'll be in charge of everything. Wouldn't that be great? And we'll all get tax cuts. And that all that came out of that was everybody catching Kevin McCarthy saying that he thought Putin paid Trump. And it might be the only thing that Kevin McCarthy was ever right about in his entire life. But that's the way we remember the conversation. When we should be remembering it as a warning directly from the Ukrainians. Hey, wake up. Look at what's actually happening here. And in fact, if you shut up and elect Donald Trump, wouldn't be a bad bet to think that before his first term is over, you'll be impeaching him for helping Russia undermine Ukraine. And 3 years later, that's exactly what we were doing. Oh, and then we had to impeach him a second time for staging an insurrection. Well, these things happen. Anyway, thinking of this term, we were on number 15. I feel like we've read some. 16, calling for the elections in Ukraine. Right. 17 is defunding election monitors and cyber agencies here in the United States. Only people who are sticklers for free and fair democracy like having elections monitored for interference with pesky officials poking around on polling day. Putin doesn't need them anyway. Then number 18, calling Zelensky a dictator, and not in a good way, like me. Number 19, looking ahead to future U.S.-Russia investment deals. That was the readout from those talks in Riyadh. A top Russian official told Politico that there was particular interest in joint Arctic energy projects. Joint projects, political union, to own the globalists by drilling in the Arctic. Okay. Number 20, ditching democracy NGOs. The Kremlin has long complained that U.S.-funded NGOs are intelligence fronts that stir up color revolutions in former Soviet republics, including the 2014 Maidan uprising in Ukraine. Trump's team has now cut all funding to pro-democracy programs as part of its efforts to dismantle USAID. Yeah, USAID ran those pro-democracy programs. Get rid of those because reasons, and that will be very helpful to us. Isn't that great? And also, of course, the Russian accusation that USAID workers are really intelligence fronts. It's really the CIA, deep state. Get rid of it. Number 21, cracking down on wokery. Hate that rendering, but okay. To be fair, this is what Trump really wants too, and it's probably just a coincidence that Putin seems to share a similar outlook on issues like transgender rights. Possibly. 22, slamming Europe for its failures on migration. Trump has said Europe needs to get its act together to stop out-of-control migration. His Vice President J.D. Vance launched an all-out assault on the continent, the whole damn thing, over just about everything else. In his first outing at the Munich Security Conference last weekend, it's likely to have been music to Putin's ears. Maybe we can get through the rest of it here. Number 23, Vance backing the victory in Romania of Georgescu. Now, how do you pronounce the guy's first name? I don't know. Chalin? I have no idea. Calin with a diacritical mark of some kind over the A. Georgescu is probably the best I can do for you in Romania. That's right. The U.S. VP sided with the candidate who won the first round of Romania's presidential election last year following a suspected Russian hybrid attack and a highly dubious social media influence operation. Can't believe that would happen. The Romanian Constitutional Court was so concerned it annulled the election. We did make note of that along the way. Number 24, I might be able to sneak in. Attacking Germany for its firewall against the far right. Vance didn't mince words. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you, he said. And then we'll do, say, numbers 25 through 29 after we come back from the break and then move on from there to round up more stuff for you for the weekend.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, so I've got a couple more items to give you for things that Trump has done in the first month in office that pleased Putin, that adhered to the Putin agenda. And then on to a couple of other things, including something else that just flashed across my screen that will make us look like we're doing a good job. So you got to have one of those involved. I'll get to that later. I think. Number 25 on our list here, you might have guessed, came up next. Backing the AfD in Germany's election. After having heard about the Romanian backing, Trump's best billionaire buddy Elon Musk openly endorsed the far-right alternative for Germany, the AfD party, and its candidate, Alice, is it Weidel? I don't know, Weidel, to become chancellor in Sunday's election. So keep an eye on that. It's happening over the weekend. The AfD is set for its best ever result, according to polls. Maybe. Many AfD supporters are sympathetic to Moscow, which was interesting for neo-Nazis. Intelligence services have warned of a Russian campaign to disrupt the vote. Remember, they're out to denazify Ukraine, denazify Canada, but renazify Germany, which of the three is probably the worst option available. Anyway, but the most chaotic, so the most obviously pro-Trump and pro-Russian. Number 26, Musk backing Reform UK in Britain. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has a history of making favorable comments about Putin, something his centrist opponents have used to attack him. Number 27, objecting to the phrase, quote, Russian aggression in a draft G7 statement on Ukraine. And number 28 here, I thought I was almost done here, but number 28, winning the presidential election. Okay, so this one too was really in Trump's interest first, but the Kremlin is certainly pleased that Trump beat Harris to the White House. Number 29, winning forever. Trump has hinted he wouldn't mind so much if his country's constitution were tweaked to let him stay on for a third term in office. Putin did that in Russia already. So we're behind on that one. And I did see CPAC, the CPAC conference is going on these days. You might have seen news clips, video clips of Elon Musk rambling incoherently behind a pair of dark sunglasses in the middle of the night yesterday, wielding a chainsaw, just in case you thought he was possibly being portrayed unfairly as insane and dangerous. And other things going on there include, I think I saw a banner promoting, some, who knows whether it was a workshop or a speech or something, rendering, what called the Third Term Project, I think, and rendering Trump as a Julius Caesar figure on it, like depicting him as a marble bust of Roman era with laurels on his head and everything like that. His gigantic orange head. It contrasts terribly with the color of the laurels, but what can you do? Anyway, it's all rendered in that white marble, unpainted marble, even though apparently they used to paint those things all the time. Plus, of course, a weirdo shot of J.D. Vance sitting for an interview with suit pants that ride up to like the middle of his shins, revealing flesh between his socks and pants, his flood level pants. Once again, looking like a guy who just doesn't know how to buy a suit, and something hillbilly elegy, yada yada. Anyway, yeah, there's the Third Term Project thing, if I can find that as I'm scrolling through. Yeah, I was struck by that too, and comparing him to Caesar, and we're only about 3 weeks from the Ides of March, by the way, so Ides don't know if that's such a great idea to compare yourself to Julius Caesar, but as people pointed out, that on 315 senators, you could do the funniest thing. See whether they pick up on the hint, or whether Trump knows enough to stay away from the Senate. I don't really know. You might think, well, they wouldn't do that to him. It's Republican dominated. But then again, the whole deal was Julius Caesar didn't think the Senate was going to do that to him either. So, I'm just pointing that out. It's just a little piece of history that everybody should pay some attention to. Let's see if I can find that. There was a very active night, last night. So got to scroll. There it is. Trump as Caesar is great optics, says Shane Trejo, Trejo. No, it could be Trejo, but I don't think so. Of the Third Term Project. And why not say that? That seems like an awfully dumb thing to do, and yet they're doing it. All right. So where do we want to go with this one? Let's stick with... should I do this in order? Sure. Why not? So I mentioned to you that the mention of the meeting in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, brought to mind an article unconnected to anything else that I'm thinking about at the moment, but certainly connected to recent events and international relations, and it's a subject we've definitely touched on in the past here on the show. It's been a couple of years, but where the whole Saudi Arabia formulation came from when we did a little bit of light reading, and I mean really light research. No, we didn't hurt ourselves stretching in the research. We were just basically thumbing our way through Wikipedia, trying to figure out bits and pieces of Middle East history that, historians of the region and people who live there probably actually know quite well, and those of us living on the other side of the world with a mild or passing interest might not have known. But, when we discovered that, it's called Saudi Arabia because, I guess it struck us as, hey, that's weird. The name of the family that owns it is Saudi Arabia. Well, okay, I guess it must have been that way since forever. But then we learned in reading Wikipedia and other brief histories that, actually in the early 20th century, it was, this close to being owned by a different family, a different tribe, essentially. And that the Rashid family, and it could easily have emerged as Rashidi Arabia if they were as, self-centered as the Saud family. I don't know if that was the case, but that they basically had a big feud and the Saud family won out, and now it's Saudi Arabia, and we pretend that it's always been Saudi Arabia because it's a country, not a private landhold. But we also learned a great deal about the transition of the seat of Arab and Muslim power and how the king of Saudi Arabia, I guess we thought by virtue of the fact that he was already the guardian of Mecca and Medina, it might be a good idea to put him, under his purview, the guardianship of the Dome of the Rock and of Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem as well. But that role used to belong to the king of Jordan. And then prior to that was the role of the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, wherever but this was representative of the shifting of the locus of power in the Muslim world. And it was very interesting to read about back then. And it is relevant again, because it's always relevant, because world's major religions, right? But Booman, Martin Longman, Booman over at the Progress Pond, his blogging home, had an entry that I don't know why he brought it up, but he happened to have, I didn't see the rest of the conversation on Blue Sky, but he happened to have brought it up and posted a link to this thing, which it's a recent entry from February 12th. And he just happened to be mentioning that, I think he had said this was one of his father's favorite pieces, so he posted. I don't know why he was mentioning that, but this is interesting and relevant. And I don't know what the rest of this series is, but this one is day 22. I guess it's maybe the day 22 of the administration, February 12th. The title of the piece: "The fascist regime, ours, that is, destabilizes the Jordanian monarchy." And how so? Well, the picture is of what's the king's name? Is he Abdullah now? But the king of Jordan visiting with Trump at the White House, having a handshake with a big sourpuss look on the king's face because he realizes he's just been played, because he just sat down with the guy who said, "We're keeping Gaza." And yeah, that is a huge undermining of the Jordanian monarchy. You probably feel it inherently. But wait till you hear Martin's explanation for the whole thing. It was very interesting historically. So here's an interesting historical fact. He begins: the same family, just like the Sauds in Saudish Arabia, the same family known as the House of Hashim, or the Hashemites, served as stewards of the Islamic holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Not the Sauds, but when were the Hashemites the stewards of Mecca and Medina? Like, we forgot that there wasn't always the Sauds. Well, short period of time. It's 1,000 years, give or take. 967 to 1925. That's a long time to be the stewards of the Islamic holy cities of Mecca and Medina. And how do you get to be the stewards? It's not a remote job, generally speaking. It was that was the Hashemite Empire. It as successor to that portion of the Ottoman Empire as they began to shrink prior to World War I. Well, prior to World War I, 967. It's about almost 1,000 years earlier. Now, there's a reason for their nearly millennia-long streak, and it coming to an end. The reason being about coming to an end. There's a reason for the streak, too, but there's a reason for it coming to an end, and it's relevant to things the fascist regime, ours, is threatening to do today. The second to last steward in the line was Hussein bin Ali, the king of, not Jordan, but the king of Hejaz. And just out of curiosity, I mean, it's just one of those political entities that no longer exist, mostly because of things that the West did with the area following World War I. But Hejaz in Wikipedia is the Hejaz, as a matter of fact, known as, I guess by translation from Arabic, the Barrier, is a region that includes the majority of the west coast of Saudish Arabia, covering the cities of Mecca, Medina, Jeddah, Tabuk, Yanbu, Taif, and Bali Jurashi. I'm less convinced of my pronunciation on some of those that are less well known to us. It is thus known as the Western Province, and it is bordered in the west by the Red Sea, in the north by Jordan, and in the east by Najd, and in the south by the region of Asir. So we're talking about regions within what is now consolidated in Saudish Arabia. You get the idea. But if you were the king of Hejaz, you were the king not of Riyadh, but yes, Medina, Mecca, the important, the ultra important, the most important holy sites for Muslims. So, where were we? Hussein bin Ali, the second to last steward, king of Hejaz. He began in the position in 1908 when the Ottoman Sultan, Abdul Hamid II, gave him the appointment. But after the Young Turk Revolution started an anti-Arab, Muslim, but anti-Arab process of Turkification of the Sultan's realm. It was, after all, centered in Turkey and was losing territory left and right. So the heart of the Ottoman Empire was Turkish, and the Turkish people said, why don't we Turkify the Ottoman realm, the Ottoman Empire, and put distance between ourselves and the Arabs whom we've ruled and who have contributed to our power, but are, after all, in the end, different from us. Anyway, it was a period of highlighting the differences, nationalism. Anyway, where were we? After the Young Turk Revolution started an anti-Arab process of Turkification of the Sultan's realm, Hussein, the king of Hejaz, chafed under Ottoman rule. In 1916, during World War I, which the Ottomans were fighting on Germany's side, the British enticed Hussein to rebel. Why was he chafing? Again, remember, the center of power of the Ottoman Empire was starting an anti-Arab campaign at home. What do the Arabs think of it? We want out. Who gave them the opportunity to get out? The people who were fighting against the Ottoman Empire, the British. This began the Great Arab Revolt, which is best known in the West from movies like Lawrence of Arabia. Ah, yes. Now turning on lights in America. Assisted by French, British, Australian, Indian, and other British colonial troops, the Arabs threw off Ottoman rule, but things didn't work out quite as planned. We're going to have fantastic autonomy and independence. Not so much. The British had promised that if the Arabs were victorious against the Turks, they would gain a unified kingdom spanning from Aleppo in northern Syria, remember them recently in the news, to Aden. Where is that? Yemen. Remember them recently in the news? This promise was not kept. Instead, the Brits and French split up the Arab regions of the Ottoman Empire, creating League of Nations mandates. Remember those? In Palestine. Remember them? And the countries we now know as Iraq. Remember them? Jordan. Syria. Remember them? And Lebanon. Remember them? Lebanon, by the way, holds the key to what might happen to gigantic Trump hotel complexes in Gaza. Well, what happened to gigantic hotel-like complexes in Beirut the last time we attempted to squat there? Yeah. Anyway, this displeased Hussein, but all was not lost for his family. And now a quote from somewhere, although I don't see what the link is from, and it goes like this. I don't know whether this is... okay. This is from Wikipedia's entry about Ali bin Hussein, king of Hejaz. In the aftermath of World War I, Hussein refused to ratify the Treaty of Versailles in protest of the Balfour Declaration, a document supporting the Jewish settlers in Palestine. Remember them? And the establishment of British and French mandates in Syria, Iraq, and Palestine. His sons, Faisal and Abdullah, were made rulers of Iraq and Transjordan, later Jordan, respectively, in 1921. So all these things, we tend to think about these things. If they were established as countries before we were born, we just think they were always there. Well, old timers, mostly dead, although Elon Musk thinks they're still alive and getting Social Security, will remember. They might remember. Maybe people didn't know about this stuff then because they didn't pay much attention. But what happened to Hijaz? That was like around for how long? How long was Hijaz? Does it say? Give me a range of dates. History, prehistoric history. Yeah, well, by the way, the history part of Hijaz has an entry here, and not even the, first paragraph here. Era of Abraham and Ishmael. What? Wow. Okay, but there's actually the establishment of a University of Qasim happening before the age of Abraham and Ishmael. By the way, in case you thought the only civilized people were you and me. But you don't believe that because you listen to this show. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I was looking for a quick range of dates, but I guess basically you would say since eternity, there was just this kingdom of Hijaz. And then, in the 1920s, it went away and said we were handed, no. This is Jordan. This is Transjordan. This is Syria. This is Iraq. And everybody was like, I never heard of those things. They're new inventions. You would think that conservatives of the time would say, I don't like this new stuff, identifying them by different pronouns. Whatever. Anyway, you get the idea. So a large chunk of this area gets split up between Hussein's two sons. One of them gets to be the ruler of Iraq, and one of them gets to be the ruler of Transjordan in 1921. He later refused to sign the Anglo-Hashemite Treaty. You all know about that one, right? No? And was thus left in a very precarious position. I didn't know about it either. The British decided progressively to stop supporting him after the proclamation of his caliphate and the refusal to sign any treaty with them. That'll get you in trouble with them. Thus, they decided to support someone else in the neighborhood, right? Okay, World War I has ended. He's not signing the Treaty of Versailles. We don't care. What about the Anglo-Hashemite Treaty? That sounds important to the Anglos. The Hashemites said no to it, and so what happens? They find another guy in the area. Who is the local ruffian that they take up with? Then at this point, you may recognize this guy. His first name, I guess, is this just, I don't know, is this his full name? I guess so. Ibn, and his last name is Saud. Have you heard of these guys? The Hashemites won't sign the treaty. Well, Ibn Saud will, and he then promptly launches an invasion of the kingdom of Hijaz. In October of 1924, facing defeat by Ibn Saud, he abdicated and was succeeded as king by his eldest son, Ali bin Hussein. That sounds fun, right? But of course, Ibn Saud was around and available to do this dirty work because he had previously defeated the Rashids. So, that's where we come into this story. Something we've discussed before. With the British, now back to Martin here, with the British supporting the Sauds, really, but it says the Saudis, Ali bin Hussein, the new king of Transjordan, did not last long in the position of custodian of the two holy mosques. They were in Hajjiz. Anyway, so I guess he was king of that at the time. And, what do you know? Having been overrun by a guy by the name of Saud, somebody else became custodian, right? So Ali bin Hussein did not last long in the position of custodian of the two holy mosques. In 1925, he fled to Iraq, where his brother Faisal had been crowned king in 1921. Remember that? His brother Abdullah became king of Jordan. the Hashemite line was blotted out in Iraq in a 1958 military coup. I wonder how that happened. But it has lasted in Jordan. So you might wonder why the Jordanians and the Jordanian kings are so trusting of the United States. It's like, didn't you blot out my brother's line? Yeah. All right. Well, but you won't blot mine out, right? No. Anyway, so in fact, the current king of Jordan, the one who is shown at the top of this piece, shaking hands with Donald Trump, who's going to keep Gaza, is Abdullah II. King Abdullah II was visiting with the fascist regime here in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday. It did not go well. Now to the point of making it a modern story. But before we get to that, hold on. We have to talk about Jordan. It gained its independence from Britain in 1946. In 1948, here's your independence. By the way, war immediately. In 1948, the Palestine War broke out, and while Israel prevailed and established itself as a country, the Jordanians captured and annexed the West Bank. You've heard of that. The West Bank was lost to Israel in the 1967 Six-Day War, and Jordan transferred its claim to the Palestinians in 1988 and signed a peace treaty with Israel in 1994. The predicate to that 1994 peace treaty was, of course, the 1993 Oslo Accords, which began a process in which a state of Palestine, including the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, would be created under the leadership of the Palestine Authority. This obviously has not happened. By the way, as I'm reading through this and thinking about the likelihood of success in creating a single state out of the disjointed territories of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, it always did seem like kind of an unlikely prospect. And I'm sure that the Trump administration would say, would point to that and say, they're never going to be able to do that. How can you rule those areas if they're not contiguous and they're disjointed? What's the plan again for Gaza? Oh, it's going to be American. We're going to take it. How are you going to govern that as a disjointed, non-contiguous territory? Shut up. Oh, well, at any rate, so yes, the Oslo Accords obviously never actually happened in terms of implementing a unified Palestinian government for the two territories. Now, one last thing to keep in mind is that Jordan's relationship with the Palestinians has been uneasy ever since the 1948 war. And I guess not really discussed here is when they discussed Jordan as Transjordan. Transjordan was basically Jordan and Israel mashed together with a little bit of extra territory, maybe that used to be Syrian here and there, the whole area. And that was partitioned into Jordan and Palestine later on. Anyway, so that's the reason for the weird and tenuous relationship between Palestinians and Jordanians. Like for a brief period of time, they were Jordanians. Then they were partitioned into Palestinians, and they probably wished that had happened long, long ago. They had, I'm sure, a separate culture, and were like, why are we jammed together in Transjordan? We don't know. Again, that was British doing. So at any rate, now, one thing to keep in mind, right, is that Jordan's relationship with the Palestinians has been uneasy ever since the 1948 war. There was a 19-year period, they mean here the Israeli establishment, 1948. There was a 19-year period when the West Bank Palestinians lived under Jordanian annexation. But there are also hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who fled into Jordan proper. According to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, you know about them, they in the news recently too, UNRWA, UNRWA, there are currently over 2 million people living in Jordan who originally lived in or are direct descendants of people who lived in what is now Israel. That's nearly twice as many people in this category who are as those who are estimated to live in the Gaza Strip. That's a lot of refugees. It's over a third of the total population of the country in Jordan, and they have caused the monarchy some rather serious problems. And remember that Trump is saying, take more so that I can build hotels. After the 1967 Six-Day War, Palestinian Fedayeen guerrillas, Fedayeen, remember those guys? Fedayeen Saddam? Fedayeen guerrillas, this time Palestinians, relocated to Jordan and stepped up their attacks against Israel and what had become the Israeli-occupied West Bank. They were headquartered at the Jordanian border town of, is it Karama? I'm not certain how it's pronounced, but I should know it, and older folks probably do, which Israel targeted during the Battle of Karama in 1968, leading to a surge of Arab support for the Fedayeen. The PLO's strength grew, and by early 1970, leftist groups within the PLO began calling for the overthrow of Jordan's Hashemite monarchy, leading to violent clashes in June of 1970. The king didn't care about them, and they didn't like that very much. Eventually, the Hashemites drove Arafat and the PLO out of the kingdom and into Lebanon. But they remember the instability created by having militant exiled Palestinians launch unauthorized attacks against Israel, inviting lethal revenge strikes. They have also been burdened for over 75 years with the cost of taking care of and policing a huge displaced population of refugees. They cannot afford to take on a new wave of displaced Palestinians. And you know how Trump feels about the costs of immigration. Just so long as they can be transferred to somebody else, I guess he's okay with it. It's not just the financial burden that's a problem. Remember, the Hashemite kingdom lost a war with Israel in 1948, 1956, and 1967. They expelled the Palestinian resistance in 1971, despite their strong Arab street credibility. They signed a peace treaty with Israel in 1994 based on promises that have not materialized, and they are still allied and dependent on American support and are hosting now American troops, despite America's strong military and political support for the utter destruction of Gaza. At least now, completely destroying Gaza is on the agenda. Well, that's going to create some tension between the Palestinians, who represent a third of the population of Jordan, and its monarchy. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm going to continue reading this, I think, fascinating article that helps inform the modern situation in Gaza and larger parts of the modern Middle East, Jordan in particular. We left off pointing out that the history of the Hashemite monarchy remains in power in Jordan, and its relationship with the Palestinians, who represent a third of the population of Jordan, not to mention their own population in their own right elsewhere, and the weird historical relationship that the Hashemite monarchy's line had with Islam internationally as the previous guardians of the holy sites, now lost to the Sauds, having established Saudish Arabia as their own personal fiefdom. Okay, well, we were pointing out it's not just this financial burden of taking care of and policing so many refugees. But remember, the Hashemite kingdom, on the rocks here, having lost wars with Israel 3 times, and then expelled the Palestinian resistance in 1971, despite their, as they said, the strong Arab street credibility in the greater Arab world. Yeah, the sympathies were probably with the PLO and not with the king of Jordan. They signed a peace treaty with Israel. That couldn't have made them any more popular. They are, and then, of course, the promises of it have not materialized. Still allied with and dependent on American troops, now hosting, or American support, now hosting American troops. That's not going to help them either. In 2021, and I guess here again we're probably back to reading from Wikipedia. In 2021, Jordan and the United States added a defense cooperation agreement that became law by royal decree, as I guess, well, not all laws in Jordan are laws by royal decree, as they pointed out. They bypassed Parliament. They have a Parliament. They just said, well, royal decree. There's now a new defense cooperation treaty with the United States. Not great on the Arab street, I'm sure. Bypassing the parliament and generating considerable public backlash. Opposition members of parliament denounced the agreement as a violation of Jordanian sovereignty and as a national humiliation. And, they're not big on national humiliations over there, or anywhere, for that matter. While the backlash in no way changed the agreement, or U.S.-Jordanian relations, for that matter, the indignant tone was a harbinger of things to come, as domestic opposition to the U.S. military presence has grown since then. With U.S. support for the Israeli bombing of Gaza, that opposition became louder still. Now back to Martin. The kingdom has somehow survived all these disappointments and perceived betrayals, but they can't survive if they're seen as facilitating an American annexation of the Gaza Strip by accepting displaced Gazans as refugees. Again, would add again. This would be like a second Nakba, the Arabic word meaning catastrophe, used to describe the 1948 mass displacement of Palestinians. But despite all this history, Trump has proposed, despite the existence of this history, he is ignorant of it, as indeed I was. True, but I guess I would say, brief me on what's going on here before I say something dumb. That's not the Trump style, though. Despite all this history, Trump has proposed to remove all Palestinians from Gaza. I mean, I think I could have told you that wasn't going to work out that well, even without studying the history. Removing all Palestinians from Gaza and relocating them to Egypt and Jordan. He has stated that the over 2 million resulting refugees would not be allowed to come back to Gaza. They're big on that too. Now another clip from I don't know where, but maybe again, this is probably a news source. Oh, here it is. The link is to the word proposed, and this comes from the New York Times, reporting on the Gaza situation. In an interview with Fox News broadcast on Monday, Mr. Trump said he did not envision Palestinians who left Gaza to make way for the redevelopment plan ever returning. Asked in the interview whether the Palestinians would eventually have the right to return to Gaza after his proposed construction projects had been completed, the president said no, they wouldn't. Okay. As for where they might go, he said, I think I could make a deal with Jordan. I think I could make a deal with Egypt. They've already done more than their share, of course, in taking in those refugees, but he thinks he can force some more on them. And then on Tuesday, he hosted Abdullah II at the White House. Donald Trump on Tuesday pressed Jordan's King Abdullah to take in Palestinians who would be permanently displaced under the president's plan for the U.S. to take over the Gaza Strip, even as the king said his country was firmly opposed to the move. Speaking alongside the Arab country's ruler in the White House, Trump signaled he would not budge on his idea that involves moving the Gaza Strip's shell-shocked residents and transforming the war-ravaged territory into what he billed as a, quote, Riviera of the Middle East. Trump has infuriated the Arab world by saying that Palestinians would not be able to return to their homes under his proposal to redevelop the enclave, which has been devastated by an Israeli offensive. We're going to take it. We're going to hold it. We're going to cherish it. He couldn't think of another word for it. Hold, coddle, cuddle, molest, probe. We're going to cherish it. We're going to get it going eventually. Eventually. Wow. Where a lot of jobs are going to be created for the people in the Middle East, just not the people who live there. Trump said in the Oval Office, saying his plan would, quote, bring peace to the region. Now back to Martin. On one level, what Trump is saying is insane and delusional. He's asking us to believe that we can convince every Gazan to leave Gaza, knowing that they'll never be allowed to come back and enjoy the jobs created in the Riviera of the Middle East. He can do this without it costing any money or requiring any troops in fantasy land, if he wants to. And these displaced people will be welcomed and cause no trouble to Egypt, Jordan, Israel, or the new American enclave. That's all preposterous, but he appears to be serious about seizing Gaza and treating it as a choice real estate development opportunity. We're going to take it, we're going to hold it. Just saying this, even if it never happens, is needlessly destabilizing to the Hashemite kingdom. Forcing the king to appear in person and listen to this nonsense is another national humiliation for Jordan that puts the monarchy at risk. It forced Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi to make the media rounds in an effort to do cleanup in Aisle 9. He announced that Arab nations will produce a plan to rebuild Gaza without displacing its people. Good. You should be coming up with that plan. We should be coming up with that plan. But no, you can do it. We're not gonna. And claimed that the king had explained and that Trump understood that Jordan cannot afford financially or existentially to go along with this plan. There is, alas, no evidence that Trump understands that or anything. What he's doing could easily result in the end of something uninterrupted since the 10th century, which is Hashemite power in the Middle East. It puts Jordan's peace treaty with Israel at risk. It also puts Egypt's peace treaty with Israel at risk. If this is true, this is true if Trump somehow follows through, and it might even be true if he doesn't, simply because what he's proposing is so irresponsible and offensive. Remember, the Hashemites lost their 1,000-year hold on Mecca and Medina because the Brits and the French didn't like being lectured about their broken promises. The Jordanian monarchy has played nice with the West, and its reward is to lose legitimacy with its own people because promises aren't kept. Does Trump care about any of this? No, he doesn't. He wants Jordanian help in a mass ethnic cleansing project and a second Nakba. These things will continue until the fascist regime is defeated. By which he means ours, of course. So I thought that was a interesting update and a good perspective on a major set of issues and problems that we, I think fairly enough have been examining from our own point of view. After all, it's happening in our country and it's our fault and it's ostensibly our president that's doing it. But yeah, good point. And another data point in the everything Trump touches dies thing. To destroy a 1,000-year monarchical dynasty, more or less single-handed. Well, no, he had a great deal of help earlier on and all of that. But I guess stamping out the last remnants of it. And it's not the worst thing, I guess, in the abstract, ending wacky hereditary monarchical rule in, anywhere. Okay, not a bad idea. Terrible idea, of course, to then declare yourself king of America at the same time, but that would have been a terrible idea independently. All right, so I don't know. I thought that was a great inclusion. I did find the mention on Blue Sky of Russia's allegations about Canada. This comes from, a name I'm going to have to pronounce, Anton Gerashenko. That's not too bad. Anton Gerashenko, an Ukrainian patriot, advisor to the Internal Affairs Minister, briefly, in Ukraine, and he was the one responsible for this post. He screen grabbed something from Sputnik. Remember Sputnik? Not the satellite, but the news agency. Sputnik Africa. And it says here, Russia ready to engage in dialogue with any country. Russia concerned about unbridled growth of neo-Nazi ideas in Ukraine, where they're invading, Baltic states, where they would like to invade, and several European countries, which they'd like to invade, and Canada, which I guess they'd like the United States to invade. That according to Lavrov, their foreign minister, right? Anton's comment on this Sputnik Africa post from wherever it came from. Lavrov says Russia is worried about, quote, unbridled growth of neo-Nazi ideas in Ukraine, Baltic states, several European countries, and Canada. Is Russia going to denazify Canada now? I don't know if he really believes that Russia is going to do this in Canada. Although that should put us on notice. I don't know. Maybe. What if they did? What would the United States say? We've been walking around saying, well, we're going to invade Canada. We'll annex Canada. We'll take over Canada. Which I guess might be, was originally like, well, that's crazy and destabilizing. I mean, par for the course for Trump. Yes, but idiotic, outrageous, unbelievable. Trump's the biggest dope in the world. But suppose you found out, if there was one thing to sane wash all of that, suppose you found out that the plan was, well, Russia's going to invade Canada. Just going to come straight over the North Pole and invade Canada. And I mean, that's like been a realist, well, I don't know how realistic, but it's been an actual worry and preoccupation for NATO and American defense forces since forever. That was always a problem. I mean, they're in close proximity up there. It's just really cold and people don't like hanging out up there or ferrying large amounts of troops and weapons across that region. It's a difficulty. We hope that cold and ice and snow will keep that from happening. But, we're in close proximity up there. If you consider Canada as being, on our side, which it kind of always has been until like right now. But I was going to say, if the only thing that can sane wash the idea of occupying Canada at this point would be to say, well, what if Russia has legitimate designs on invading there? Wouldn't it be better if that was occupied by American troops than by Russian troops? Gah, I guess so. Yeah, I don't think that will help make Trump's plans any saner. Only because I think the likelihood of, well, they haven't been able to nail down Ukraine. I don't think they have the ability to do this. But supposing they convinced us that they did, yeah, that would be something. And of course, that would be a great pretext, right? They come over the Arctic Circle. The Canadians are repelling the invasion. The Americans show up to back up the Canadians. Without the last couple of weeks, they would no doubt be greeted as liberators, one might say, in Canada. But then if they just stayed, less so. But they might be, the gates would have been thrown open to the liberators if Trump had kept his mouth shut. But I don't know if he really believed that the Russians were going to provoke the situation needed to keep Canada. And I think he'd rather be doing tough talking and just saying, I like this destabilizing the international order by blabbing. That's more fun to me than coming in through the back gate here and then just seizing Canada that way. But, well, an interesting thing to think about over the weekend. Something else for you to think about. Consider starting to bite your nails. That's my recommendation to you. All right. So another thing that this is the one that I happened upon while reviewing social media during one of the breaks. And here we get to say, oh, I've done my job in preparing you for this. Do you remember our discussion of the Administrative Procedure Act and the people who adjudicate the disputes under Administrative Procedure Act, the administrative law judges, the ALJs? I told you about, I don't know, maybe yesterday, the day before, can't remember exactly when. We made mention of the ALJs. ALJs in the news. Charlie Savage doing the reporting here on this one. And then I guess should we long story short it, or should we we'll read you the Charlie Savage story to give you the full background. New York Times reporting, well, just yesterday, as a matter of fact, probably around the time we were talking about ALJs. Here's your headline: Trump claims power to fire administrative law judges at will. I did tell you that ALJs are not Article 3 judges appointed for lifetime tenure, but they are, in fact, federal judges. Can Trump fire him at will? Well, note here that he claims that power. That hints at the fact that he doesn't really have that. Or he claims it, but you know how he claims things, falsely. The Justice Department said a law protecting the officials from arbitrary removal is an unconstitutional intrusion on presidential authority. Right. So the Justice Department says, sure, you can fire them because unitary executive. Right. And Did we discuss this on yesterday's program? Yes, I'm pretty sure I did. And then I took it to Blue Sky afterwards, reminding everybody that the ultimate example of leopards eating faces, right? Dick Cheney, the most enthusiastic backer of relitigating Watergate so that he could declare the primacy of the unitary executive theory, which was a theory that he really loved when he was part of and the power behind the executive. Then he left behind something that was super dangerous, and we said at the time, don't you see how dangerous this unitary executive theory is? It could be used against you, at which he said, cry more, libtards. There's no chance that Dems, when they achieve power, will have the guts to use unitary executive theory against me. Oh, yeah, well, I mean, the problem with this theory is it's so dangerous. How do you know Republicans won't use it against you? Again, why would they ever do that? I'm the head chief Republican in charge around here. I'm so powerful, my daughter is one of the head chief Republicans in charge. She was the number 3 ranking House Republican in the whole conference. She was the Republican conference chair when she did all the things that eventually got her kicked out of the Republican Party and targeted by MAGA. Of course, the leopard ate your face. And how did they do it? With the power of the unitary executive. And here they are claiming that this thing that she was investigating that doomed her, that sealed her fate, January 6th, was all legitimate exercise of power by the then unitary executive Donald Trump. It wasn't an insurrection. It was safeguarding America by order of the unitary executive at the time. January 6, 2021, Donald Trump was president. He can order anything he likes, and he's immune for doing it. Anyway, yeah, so Trump claims the power to fire ALJs. The Justice Department, which is supposed to say, no, the law actually says you can't do that, instead says, yes, you can. Because protecting ALJs from removal is unconstitutional because the president is the commander of everything. Wow, thanks, Justice Department. Charlie Savage, as I said, did the reporting here. The Trump administration told Congress on Thursday that it believed President Trump had the constitutional power to summarily fire administrative law judges at will, despite a statute that protects such officials from being removed without a cause like misconduct. Ironic, again, that it would be arbitrary for him to fire them for no reason. And you know what the Administrative Procedure Act says about things that are arbitrary. Problem is, who adjudicates disputes under the Administrative Procedure Act? Administrative law judges. If they're arbitrarily fired, they aren't around to rule that their firing was arbitrary. Just like the other plan we told you about yesterday, firing the Merit Systems Protection Board people. They aren't around to receive the complaints that people have been fired arbitrarily because they've been fired arbitrarily. Anyway, the move was the latest step in the administration's unfolding assault on the basic structure of the federal government and on Congress's power to insulate various types of executive branch officials in sensitive positions from political interference from the White House. The Trump administration disclosed its approach in a letter to Sarah M. Harris, the acting Solicitor General. Administrative law judges preside over administrative hearings in the executive branch agencies. They are executive branch officials, not life-tenured members of the judicial branch, but they still perform judges' roles, including by administering oaths, taking testimony, ruling on evidentiary questions, and making factual and legal determinations. The job is judge-like, but they are, in fact, executive branch. And so, it's not completely groundless that anybody who believes in the unitary executive theory would think you must absolutely have to have the ability to dismiss any executive branch employee at will. Well, wouldn't it be better for administering the country, though, if you didn't? Yes. And is that why they adopted a statute saying you don't? Yes. But what if we said the statute was unconstitutional? Well, you can't. Or can you? Examples of such officials include, by the way, of ALJs, Social Security Administration judges, SSA judges, who handle disputes about disability and retirement benefits, right? You have a dispute with the SSA. I think I should be entitled to these benefits. You want to take them away or deny them? We need a judge to decide. Do we go to the Article 3 courts? Well, what if we had specialist courts that handled only disputes like that, and judges who were well versed in everything to do with the Social Security Administration, and they did the work here? An efficiency, right? Well, we're going to eliminate that efficiency because we hate efficiency for some reason. There's also, of course, National Labor Relations Board judges who have that expertise. They resolve unfair labor practice cases. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission judges hear disputes about matters like electric utilities and regional grids. To insulate the officials from political interference, Congress enacted a statute that says disciplinary action, including firings, may be taken against such judges, but only for good cause established and determined by, ready for this one, the Merit Systems Protection Board, on the record, after opportunity for hearing before the board. That's how you would settle the dispute of whether or not you're allowed to fire an administrative law judge. The Merit Systems Protection Board. Good thing they're fired. Although, interestingly, just recently, the decision was reversed, although now I don't recall offhand whether it was reversed by an administrative law judge or an Article 3 court, but we could probably look that up or listen to yesterday's show. Ms. Harris's letter to Congress also brought to wider attention that the Justice Department had said it would no longer defend the constitutionality of the law protecting administrative law judges in a little noticed February 11th filing in an appeals court case. In that case, a paint company is challenging a fine imposed by an administrative law judge at the Transportation Department for violating a federal rule that requires paint cans to be packaged in a way that will keep them from leaking when transported on planes. What a dumb law! I hate that. I just want to buy some paint. Well, there's no paint in this can. You paid for it, but all the paint leaked out while we were flying it, but that's okay now. Great. No. The company is arguing, among other points, that because the president cannot remove such a judge at will, the judge's position is unconstitutional, and therefore they can't punish us. That's the whole of the argument. In agreeing with that view, Ms. Harris, well, it might not be the whole of the argument, but that's the whole of the argument presented here. In agreeing with that view, oddly enough, Ms. Harris pointed to a 2010 Supreme Court ruling that struck down a statute in which Congress had set up a certain government agency to have 2 layers of insulation from presidential control. The agency's board members could be removed only for cause, and they, in turn, were overseen by the Securities and Exchange Commission, whose members could also be removed only for cause. In the same way, Ms. Harris said, administrative law judges are not only protected by the statute that says they can be removed only for cause, but Congress put the decision over whether there was cause for termination not in the hands of the president, but in those of the Merit Systems Protection Board. That board, a key part of civil service protections that Congress established to professionalize the federal workforce and guard against political patronage, is itself insulated from direct presidential control by a statute that says its members may be removed by the president only for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. Notably, Mr. Trump has already violated the latter statute by summarily firing Kathy Harris, the chairwoman of the board, prompting her to sue. On Tuesday, a federal judge temporarily reinstated her, though the Trump administration has appealed. And the fact that they say federal judge here, well, I'm just going to open it up. Yeah, it happened in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia. That's a federal Article 3 judge that made that decision. So you can always go there, but then, appeal can be had from them all the way to, the 6-3 Supreme Court. Sarah M. Harris, the acting Solicitor General, previously told Congress that the administration considered limits on firing members of independent agencies to be unconstitutional as well. The Trump administration has embraced an ideology called, the unitary executive theory. That doctrine says the Constitution should be reinterpreted to prohibit Congress from placing any limits on the president's ability to impose total control on the executive branch, including to fire subordinates at will, even for no reason or terrible reasons. Since taking office, Mr. Trump has violated numerous statutes in which Congress set limits on when various types of officials can be fired, including inspectors general, members of independent agencies, and civil servants. Many of the firings have led to lawsuits, setting up test cases to see if the Supreme Court will strike down those statutes and expand the power of Mr. Trump and future presidents, if any. In a statement, Chad Mizell, the chief of staff to Attorney General Pam Bondi, hailed the administration's move to challenge the statute insulating administrative law judges. Wow. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Got one more segment to get through this. So it was only a couple more sentences in the Charlie Savage piece that we were reading here. We were wasting our time at the end with a statement from Chad Mizell, the chief of staff to Pam Bondi, saying this thing was great. And the idea of firing administrative law judges was long overdue. Well, he had more garbage to say about that. But that's the way it sets up. They believe that they can build on 2010 Supreme Court precedent to expand the reach and the ability to fire any executive branch employee at will. And we'll see how the 6-3 Supreme Court comes down on all of this, and whether they think whether either Trump or his Solicitor General or any of the Supreme Court justices think that this could somehow be expanded. It wouldn't make a great deal of sense, for instance, like logically, to leap from, well, we can fire administrative law judges because they're not life tenured and they're not judicial branch employees, so therefore we're safe. He can't just fire us at will if we don't decide his way. But at some point, he just jumps the logic and says, I can fire you at will. And if you think you're going to overrule me in that, I would say you're not actually a justice because you were fired anyway. And good luck trying to file a grievance against me. We're going to bulldoze you. And I mean, if you can't see it coming, I guess I would remind you of this, right? If you're a Supreme Court justice saying, well, I'm actually safe, I would say, I know it's not an exact parallel, but I'll remind you of the face-eating parable I told you about Dick Cheney creating the unitary executive theory, or I don't know that he could really be credited with creating it, but he's certainly an early adopter and an enthusiastic supporter of the idea. And within his lifetime, it ate his face and his daughters too. And they were kings and queens, respectively, of the Republican Party at the time. Except, whoops, not anymore. Now we're out. And we're enemies of the state. And we may be prosecuted under the unitary executive theory. And by the way, prosecuted for activity that is explicitly immunized in the Constitution. What's the logic? I don't know. They want to do it. Speech and debate clause. Well, we can find a way around that. And the way around that is iron-fisted control of the Supreme Court, including the ability to iron fist the Supreme Court holdouts right out of the country if we need to, and installing people who will facilitate that iron-fistedness. It's dangerous. You should never have done this, Dick. But I'm not terribly sympathetic to you or your daughter. I think you're right in your claims, but you dug your grave, too. And Supreme Court justices that say, well, it's only ALJs will be digging their own graves as well. Just wanted to point that out. Now, if you find that terribly depressing, you're probably right about that. But I thought I might share with you some maybe hopeful, helpful information. Some of what went on last night. Oh, I guess I should be pointing out something else as well. While we're on the subject of firing executive branch employees or quasi-governmental employees, I guess it could be expanded to. Could be expanded to anybody, of course, because if there's no limitation on you, well, then you can be expanded to anyone. I just happened to notice or happened to remember that lots of discussion last night and this morning will likely be about the reporting from Jacob Bogaj. Who's Jacob? Tell me something, Jacob. Jacob is a reporter for the Washington Post covering Congress and economics and is a bad golfer, as he puts in his bio here. Jacob reports huge news with flashing police siren lights and everything, but also a mailbox. Not just that this is news landing in your inbox, but that it's about mail. Trump plans to fire the United States Postal Service Governing Board and merge the Postal Service into the Commerce Department. It is pointed out here in the Blue Sky posting, without reading the full article, that it would disrupt 55 years of non-political mail service. I mean, more than that, I would think, and threatens to upend trillions of dollars of e-commerce and the 250-year-old U.S. mail system, where that's where I thought it's older than 55 years of non-political mail service. But are we saying we had 200 years of political mail service? Maybe, but it was still conducted on a mostly nonpartisan fashion. I think there's an attached article. Trump expected to take control of USPS, fire Postal Board, officials say, and of course that prompted all sorts of quite pointed and justifiable complaints from Democrats who said, yeah, wouldn't we just go 4 years begging Joe Biden to fire Louis DeJoy, the postmaster appointed by Trump? And we were told, no, you can't do that. And I mean, according to the normal rules, yeah, but normal rules are out the window, right? So we forbear over the course of 4 years, and then immediately within a month, as soon as Trump is back in office, like, oh yeah, you idiots thought you had to forbear, but you don't, because I'm not gonna. I was just more interested in where are all my normie pundits who say, well, you can't do this because this will escalate into tit for tat. Right? That's always their excuse. Don't do this because it will escalate into tit for tat. Now here's Trump going to fire U.S. Postal Service, everybody, the Board of Governors. Well, don't do this because it'll escalate into tit for tat. Well, that would just ring hollow because, of course, we just watched it not escalate into tit for tat when they had every opportunity, Democrats did, to escalate it into tit for tat. But, of course, did not escalating it into tit for tat prevent Trump from coming in and escalating it into tit for tat? Well, there won't be any tat, but he's certainly escalating it into, well, I guess the first part of the equation. Just thought I needed to put that on the record, of course, that this had happened because you all saw it happen. And golly, it's important to note. But I also wanted to give you some reason, if I could, for hope heading into the weekend. And this will require some audio engineering. We'll see if I think I put in Pocket so I can retrieve it from the main noise-making computer. My post that ended up becoming a thread last night. I had seen everybody's good pal and ours here on the show as well, Matthew Chapman, pointing out on Blue Sky an article that he had grabbed from Raw Story and had probably in fact produced for Raw Story, if I'm reading correctly. Yeah, there we go, and it's got his byline on it. The story title over at Raw Story is "Stand Up for Us!" exclamation point, and that's in quotes. That's somebody saying it and then having it included in the headline. "Stand up for us. Republican shouted down as he defends dodgy cuts at town hall." It is the coverage of the town hall meeting held by Representative Rich McCormick, Republican of Georgia, and widespread coverage of the reaction to the event. He was basically found himself being shouted at by his constituents at his town hall meeting and found himself arguing with a crowd of attendees and, by the way, an overflow crowd being turned away at the door outside. There was video outside of his staffers saying, "We can't let you in because fire code, and don't worry, and we hear you," but she too ends up having to argue with the constituents. And the film of McCormick inside was rather interesting and astounding all by itself, but it became a thread. I was saying, I'm getting the sense here that town halls are not going well for Republicans. And it's not all town hall meetings. And it may be the end of the town hall meetings at this point, but the rest of the Republicans will see what happened to Rich McCormick, and they'll be canceling town hall meetings left and right. But not just town hall meetings. Everywhere Republicans were appearing in the last day or so, and if you go back a little further, the appearance of Pete Hegseth and his wife at overseas military bases and getting booed there by the families, which is kind of an unprecedented thing to have happen. The Secretary of Defense visits, even drunk though he may be, visits the base and is booed specifically over his zeal in ending DEI programs, which, are, I'm sure, beneficial to the vast majority of the personnel at the base and the families with them. So, anyway, difficult and troubling to people who care, but luckily for them, I guess these are people who don't care. But this happened everywhere. And a lot of it is caught on tape. And so let me give you some samplings. I mean, you got to hear, it's some pretty robust reactions. Now, I don't know what was going on here, but this was a presidential event captured here, presented to us by Aaron Rupar, who's got the video of everything. Trump at an event doing I don't know what. The Fox News chyron from the coverage says Tiger Woods joins Trump at Black History event. And I thought we were getting rid of those Black History events. I didn't want to, but I thought that they were doing that because DEI. But he got to appear with Tiger Woods, so that one didn't get canceled. But this clip is him introducing, I guess, the CEO of Pfizer. And as we said, the old man has forgotten that people didn't like the vaccines or big pharma as when he attacks them. And so he's introducing a billionaire businessman. I'm sure he's a billionaire. He's made himself a billionaire with the payments from Pfizer, but a rich CEO businessman being introduced here for I don't know what reason and getting booed. And Trump is kind of unprepared for it. And it's not about dodgy activities, but it's still a shift in the mood and a reminder even to Trump that there is a bubble that you're living in here. And even if you only let MAGA people into it, you can stumble into their opposition. So again here, Trump introducing the chair of Pfizer, and let's see if we can't play the audio so you can hear what happens.
We also have the head of Pfizer here, so I want to thank him. One of the great people, one of the great businessmen. Thank you, Albert. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I want to congratulate our newly.
All right, so I mean, that's pretty easily distinguished booing and pretty obvious and pretty robust for an event that Trump is at. And I don't know how they handled admission to this event or where it was being held, but that's kind of surprising. And of course, Trump reverts to form simply by doing, thank you all the way through it, as though he's receiving adulation. He just simply refuses to acknowledge that it's booing. So, all right, well, that was unexpected. Now, I don't know the timing of all these events, but this is all from the last day or two. I mean, this thing is time-stamped, you know how they do. It's 18 hours or so since Aaron posted this. I don't know when it happened. And then 21 hours or so since Keith Boykin. Who am I reading here? Keith Boykin. Keith, author of Why Does Everything Have to Be About Race? Dartmouth College, Harvard Law, former White House aide, National Black Justice Coalition co-founder Keith Boykin, making this observation, wherein Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, the plane crash guy, is booed by protesters as he announces Trump is cutting off funding for high-speed rail between Los Angeles and San Francisco. Instead of dealing with all the planes crashing everywhere, the former real-world star is abandoning investments in U.S. infrastructure. And again, I don't know how they controlled admission to this event, and it sounds like there was a planned attendance by protesters at this one, but I mean, they haven't got the iron, curtain down on these guys yet, and whether it was organized or not, I don't care. Well, actually, I do care. If it was organized, and it does sound like it was, good. This is exactly what needs to be happening. There needs to be a Tea Party-esque mood out there that it's dangerous and difficult for Republicans to appear in public and state their policy objectives. They're going to get confronted. Here's Sean Duffy. See what's going on here? And he's forced eventually to argue with the audience. That he's really lost it there. Trump at least maintains the composure to just say thank you. Not Sean Duffy.
So if you want to go protest somewhere, if you want to shout at someone.
And this is not the whole of the thing here. This actually picks up in the middle where he begins by saying, and we're going to get rid of this stupid debacle, this boondoggle of high-speed rail, and people start booing and protesting. This is the argument phase in which he says, oh, listen to you. You're booing. You want to go boo somebody, go boo the Democrats who, you'll hear it.
So if you want to go protest somewhere, if you want to shout at someone.
They're already shouting.
Go to the governor's mansion. Go talk to Democrats in the legislature who have brought us this crappy project. Right? So we've seen over the course of the last month what DOGE has exposed with regard to fraud, waste, and abuse. And we're done with it. And you know what? You're going to have people who love fraud, who love waste, who love trains to nowhere. But all of us up here, we do not love fraud, waste, and abuse. We are going to use the taxpayer money efficiently and effectively, and this is a boondoggle. There is, and again, I would love if they build a rail.
I would love if they build rail. Yeah, sure. Well, they're doing it. But yeah, you see what's happening here? He's arguing with the crowd. Go protest somebody else. And, I guess you love fraud. I get you because you love waste. The crowd is screaming right over him. The fact that he has a microphone is the only reason you can hear him. But inside the room, for the speaker, that's a little uncertain. You can't really be sure you're being heard at that stage of the game. And I don't know. I found that very interesting. There's more, of course. Actually, at the same event is California Republican, I guess, Kevin Kiley, who also stands up at the press event and attempts to make the same claims that California rail is actually super unpopular and a boondoggle. And guess what happens?
Good morning. I'm Kevin Kiley. I represent California's 3rd District. California's high-speed rail disaster is the worst public infrastructure failure in U.S. history.
Now, Kevin goes bug-eyed at this and is just not sure how to deal with it. Sean Duffy tries to bluff through it, but he's not as good at it as Trump is, and he gets baited into angry fighting with the audience. But Riley is genuinely surprised looking. You should see it. You will when I give you the link. I mean, I guess he attempts to resume speaking at that point, but that's a long time to be just standing there in a shower of booze. And I don't mean the way Pete Hegseth wants to stand there in a shower of booze. B-O-O-S, plural of being booed. Yeah, so there's that one. Then there was, of course, the news of Pete Hegseth being booed. I added that one to the thread. There's more. And then this really takes an interesting turn. Now, here is footage from the Rick McCormick thing that Matt was reporting on for Raw Story. And there are several videos in this one, in this thread, if we want to play them all. But here, Christopher Webb is bringing this one to our attention. Chris Webb, well, you know, not much in the way of description in the bio here, but that's okay. Doesn't really matter. He gets a hold of this video and says, we'll say crap. You got to see this town hall. Republicans are starting to get torn apart by their own constituents, and that's extremely important. And here's Rick McCormick addressing them and being yelled at and trying to respond to them. All right, a TikTok video, this one from Kay Harris fans, which I assume is Kamala Harris fans, which is okay by me. They're everywhere, even in Rich McCormick's district.
And you are doing
this is the constituents yelling
to set that down and not stand up for us. And
here's McCormick trying to talk. A lot of this stuff will be litigated, he says.
Litigating for it. You don't think I'm going to stand up for you?
You don't think I'm going to stand up for you? He asks. Now, at this point, he's now put the microphone down and he's crossed his hands, like impatiently waiting for the school kids to stop piping up. I'm not going to speak anymore if you're going to keep yelling. Right? But they're going to keep yelling.
So we're going to have a town hall.
Now you hear that comment from the crowd here? Stand up and don't bend over. I don't love that one, but okay.
Take your questions and try to answer them as honestly as I can. Then let's do that, okay? But if you're going to just yell at me, that's not going to be an effective counter.
Yeah, well, you know what? If they're going to yell at me, that's not going to be an effective. Oh, you know what? It's actually looking kind of effective right now, especially as a continuing thread of people yelling at Republicans who showed up in public thinking that they were going to get adulation for all of the tough-minded cost cutting. By the way, another TikTok video added to this one that Chris Webb adds. He makes his own mini thread. This one says, meanwhile, outside folks are not playing. Nearly 500 people showed up for Georgia Congressman Rich McCormick's District 7 town hall. This is the third overflow area. The crowd is fired up, demanding a live stream and more town halls. This TikTok comes from someone completely different, not just the Kay Harris fans, whoever that might be, but I don't know how you pronounce MC Linkist 85. I don't know where you break that up, but anyway, this is the activity outside the town hall. Outside of the third overflow area.
We have no way to control how many people.
This is the staffer.
We didn't have access to a bigger venue this time, but I tell you, we're going to do it again. When? Listen, we have to.
Save democracy.
I assure you that's not true. I am not here to adjudicate all of your grievances. I understand you have many. What I have to do right now is tell you, unfortunately, by prior code, we cannot allow everybody else.
All right, it may be difficult to hear, like on a live stream, and it's difficult to hear this now, but I'll give you the link. You can take a look at it. What's happening here is this is outside of what, looks like maybe the local courthouse or something like that, or the town hall. a staffer completely surrounded by a sea of constituents holding up their phones, filming and shouting, when are you going to have another one? Why can't you get a bigger venue? When are you going to let us in? Well, we're going to do more of these. Trust me. When are you going to do them? Well, look, I'm not here to adjudicate all of your grievances. I know that you have many. She's standing in a sea of hostile constituents in the middle of all this. And it's really, I can hear that it's pretty raucous. So it's more noise, of course, but yeah, it was really kind of remarkable. There's more also, I think, from inside the meeting that's out there in circulation. Here's let's see. Here's video. Somebody says here's video I took and uploaded to my wife's YouTube account. Literally everyone outside was, quote, mad as hell and not going to take it anymore. Do you want to hear any of this? I haven't previewed any of this. Let's be curious what this sounds like.
You guys.
This is the staffer, I think.
I don't know how far this goes. Ladies and gentlemen, I just told everybody on the inside, I am so grateful on behalf of the congressman that you guys have come out here, and I am so sorry that you're stuck out in the cold.
It's inexcusable.
I understand this is frustrating.
And
You
who
guys
are you?
took
Who are
time.
you?
I'm Julie Singleton. I'm the communications director for Congressman Rich McCormick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, okay.
I understand this is frustrating. I understand that you guys took time out of your busy schedule to come here and hear from the congressman and ask your questions. I get it. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about the capacity, and we have no way to control how many people show up.
You could have picked a bigger venue.
We didn't have access to a bigger venue
This is what we heard before.
But I
Do it
tell you,
again.
we're
Do it
going
next
to.
week.
We will do it again.
They will not do it
And
again.
let them know.
Listen,
Communications
we
will
have
be
to
sent.
look. We
I've
have.
sent emails for weeks, not a piece.
All right, listen.
He doesn't want to
Listen.
hear. He really doesn't.
I assure you that's not true. Guys, I am not here to adjudicate all of your grievances.
Much better
I
video,
understand
this
you have
one.
many. What I have to do right now is tell you, unfortunately, by fire code, we cannot allow anybody else into the building.
What's the capacity of a room?
He's got 500 people inside right now, 600 people.
You're gonna let him know?
It's not being live streamed. We don't have that. But we don't have that capacity here. But what we are doing is we're going to push.
Does it have the capacity for live stream?
We don't always have that. We don't always have that capacity depending on the venue. We do the best we can, and just like all of you guys, I'm a human being doing my job.
Aw, isn't that sad? Maybe she
that's-
should be terminated by Doji and see whether she's still a human being doing her job. Anyway, I found that very interesting. This video goes on for like 11 minutes. We can't run all of that. But what's happening here is a collection of loud, videoed protests that give me the feeling of the 2009-2010 Tea Party, so-called Tea Party organized activity at town halls that Democrats held to try to promote the Affordable Care Act. But these are even more organic, and they're happening at every kind of event, no matter what you're doing, whether Trump is there, whether it's Sean Duffy, whether it's individual congressmen. They really thought that the congressmen are all working in lockstep inside of the House and the Senate, of course, but they're working in lockstep for two reasons. One, well, the one we discussed yesterday. One is they and their families are afraid of being swatted and getting death threats. But also, a lot of them really thought that when they got out there and spoke to their constituents, they would cheer. You're finally getting stuff done. Yay for letting Elon Musk, Mr. Businessman. We need more businessmen in control in Washington to just do stuff and cut through the red tape. They thought that's what they were going to hear. And instead they're hearing, boo, boo, we hate you. You're spineless. You won't stand up. You're rolling over for everybody. We're getting fired out here as these job cuts begin to impact everybody. And I mean, I guess I always thought that they would erase the find out part by reinstating people once they got all the data and they could reliably reinstate the Republicans only. But it's moving too slowly. Guess what? They can't cut through all the red tape and move at the speed of business after all. And people are finding out that their jobs are being cut and they're mad as hell and they're showing up and they're yelling and they're screaming. I don't think this is all Democrats staging this stuff. It can't be at Rich McCormick's place. and probably wasn't at the presidential event. I don't know how that happened, but I'm sure he's furious and looking into it. I don't want that ever to happen anymore. Anyway, I just thought it would be fun to take a look at something. And as part of the fun, I've changed my profile photo over on Blue Sky. You know, my ancient headshot, which, you know, is like now 20 years old. I should probably update it, but I look so nice in that one. But I've kept it, and, you know, just visually it cues you in as a casual follower, perhaps. Oh yeah, I remember who this is. I follow this person, but I changed it anyway. Because for whatever reason, actually for completely different reasons, I was shopping around for stuff, and I was on Amazon, and I happened to check out, what about pitchfork for gardening? Oh yeah, you know, pitchforks and torches. Aren't people supposed to be carrying those things these days? And I happened upon a listing for a pitchfork over at Amazon. Amazon's choice, by the way, of I don't know which brand of pitchfork it is, but it is a pitchfork. And I noticed, you know how they promote things that are popular, right? This one, I circled it, you know, as people do, in red, and circulated the photo. 200 plus bought in the past month. 200 plus. I thought that was a great punctuation mark to the chain, the thread of posts of people booing at the town halls and showing up and voicing their displeasure, to the astonishment of Republicans who have finally left Washington, D.C. Boo! The thing you thought you were going to get praised for. Boo! 200 plus pitchforks bought in the past month. Maybe that's what's going on here. Get your pitchforks and get yourself ready. I thought that was actually, I'm going to count that as good news heading into the weekend, and an excellent way. I know we've all been begging Democrats to stand up, and people were doing a lot of complaining last night about Hakeem Jeffries having a book event in the middle of all this, and I understand the frustration there too. But I'll tell you something, a lot better and a lot more powerful and a lot more uplifting to me than Hakeem Jeffries saying, this is outrageous, and why isn't this bringing down the price of eggs, is people saying, boo, F you, you're an a-hole, get out of here, boo, directly to the faces of these Republicans. That's what we ought to be demanding more of. That's what we ought to be doing.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Okay, but before you do that, let's say if you're just warming up and still having breakfast, maybe you want to stick around instead and stay home and listen to Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next right here on Netroots Radio. But guess what? He too notes that Republican members of Congress are getting destroyed by their own voters in town halls. Top story for him too. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next week.